What's up, everybody? Wellness Week Live. I am your host, DJ Anthony. I have a special superstar guest today. Dr. Kate is here. Dr. Kate, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for coming on Wellness Week Live. And, I've been wanting to do this show for a while, as I just kind of mentioned off air. But, men's porn problem, men's porn addiction. Women can be addicted to porn, but usually it's a man's problem. And I think we're losing a whole generation to this. Now, before we get into that, I just wanted to ask you, or let us know, the viewers, a little bit about yourself. Where can people find you on social media and things like that? So, yes, you are a doctor, a therapist of...
I am a clinical sexologist, which most of your audience probably doesn't even know that was a thing, but it is. I have a PhD in sexology, which is essentially the study of sex, how it affects the human body, biologically, physiologically, and emotionally. And my practice is in Midland Park, New Jersey. I work with people individually and in couples counseling to attend to sexual dysfunction, desire discrepancy, as well as, kind of your typical run-of-the-mill reasons why people come into therapy, especially nowadays with anxiety and depression.
Right.
I've been in practice for 20 years, but I've been focusing on sex therapy for the past maybe 5 to 7 years.
Okay.
I really value not only people's ability to kind of talk about their sex life in a safe space, but I also really, really prioritize normalizing the entire spectrum of the sexual experience, including porn use and when it can become kind of compulsive, out of control behavior.
Abusive,
so I'm
right.
really grateful that you're having me on the show because I think it's an important topic.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about the addiction to porn for so many young men. And again, I think we're losing a generation of particularly young men to this. And when I found out this is kind of, your wheel well, I was like, I have to have her on. Now, and so again, where can people find you on Instagram or YouTube? What's your channel? Where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram primarily, Communicate, and Kate is spelled Cayte. And you can also find me at communicate.com or katecastrillion.com. But if you are put off by trying to spell my last name, just stick with Communicate with the Cayte at the end, and you can get all the information you need about me.
Cool. Yeah, I'll put the links in the comments below for the viewers. So let's get right into it. So, I read an article a while back, and it was kind of sad. Initially, it said STDs in America are at the lowest rates ever in American history. I was like, wow, that's great. Oh my God, amazing. Everyone's got STDs. Everyone's got low STD rate. But the old saying is, watch where you wish where you may get it. As I was reading into that article, it said the reason why the STD rates are so low in America right now today, and that is because men are not, particularly men, they're not going outside. They're not getting out. And why are they not getting out? Because they are addicted to pornography. They're addicted to video gaming, and they're addicted to online gambling. When you put those three together, men are not getting out. And you can't get an STD if you don't get out of your house or your apartment or mommy's basement or whatever. Yeah. And I was like, wow, that's so sad. Like, people, it's that bad out there. And, I want to start by saying, and you tell me what you think. I mean, I always say every single man on earth at least once has seen pornography. Every man on earth. If someone's saying if a guy says they've never seen porn, they're lying. And as a matter of fact, Reverend Billy Graham, who it was, if you don't know, youngsters, he was the most, he passed away, but he was the most prominent, like the Pope for the Christian faith. He was on the Johnny Carson show, and Johnny Carson asked him, you can go and watch it on YouTube, have you ever seen porn? And Dr. Billy Graham said, yes, he's seen porn. So it's not, people see porn. Okay. But it's turning into an issue because of this right here.
Yeah.
And people, so my question then is, why do you think men are addicted to porn though? Like, what? Because porn's been around for a while.
Yeah.
But why are men addicted, do you see in your practice, to porn? Why are they struggling with porn?
Well, I think you hit on something really interesting, that the ubiquity of porn and just, any digital kind of dopamine hit is more so obviously than ever before in history. It's becoming more and more accessible. It's anonymous. The porn use, for the most part, most people aren't broadcasting when they're looking at it. But I think the availability of the kind of fake connection we get from allowing ourselves to have orgasm through porn use is what drives the behavior. So if we're thinking about kind of the effect that this has neurologically, we are hardwired for connection. We're hardwired to have relationships. But part of that is that we're hardwired to procreate, but our bodies and our dopamine systems have no soul, right? Like specifically our dopamine systems, whether or not our bodies have a soul is up for debate. Right. But our dopamine has no soul. It doesn't know if we're getting dopamine from actually a real connection or if we're getting it from just an orgasm that was achieved through pornography.
Correct.
And when we get that kind of quick hit of fake sexual and emotional nutrition, and we don't have to work in order to get it, when we don't have to overcome the difficulties of, good communication with a partner and, tolerating the vulnerability of putting yourself out there sexually, identifying what it is that we like in bed and asking our partner for it, when we don't have to do that hard work, and the dopamine hit that we get or the orgasm experience that we get without having to do that hard work becomes the compulsive need that then drives more behavior.
Yeah,
right?
No, yeah, everything you're saying makes sense to me. And I think it's so sad though, because and again, I get it, women can be addicted to porn, but let's be honest, it's predominantly a male species problem. I think that's sad though, because millions of men are opting not to be with their wife or their girlfriend or their partner, and they're failing to see, like, don't you want to actually touch a human, hold a human? Like, there's so much rewarding goodness from physically bonding with somebody. They're throwing all of that out because it's just easier to sit in front of a screen somewhere and ejaculate. Like, how sad is that our society has become that, where there's something better out there, for people, and that is human touch, human connection. But like you said, people don't want to put the work in. We live in a very click society where everything's delivered to our door in a day, and we don't have to, no one. But that's sad. Like, nobody wants to, even the young men don't even want to put an effort to go out of the house. Like, Jesus. And I think it's going to get a lot worse, by the way, because we haven't even spoke about robotics yet. So when the AI and the software and the porn get married with robotics, which it's out there, and I don't know. I think I think humanity is, and I don't think this is an understatement. Humanity is in big trouble because, like, you see it now, right? I'm sure you see men that are taking away from their marriages and partnerships because they're busy online gambling, online porn, online video games.
Yeah.
That destroys a relationship. So my question though to you is, like, you and I are of a certain age. How has porn changed today versus in the 1970s and 80s? Like, back in the day, right? Like when I was a teenager, oh wow, your older cousin got us the VHS, whatever. But Debbie Does Dallas, but now, I mean, how has porn changed from the 70s and 80s versus today?
Yeah. So, I mean, aside from what we were just talking about, which, as far as the just ubiquity of it, the ease of it, the kind of shortening durations of it, when it was costly to create porn back in this, the 70s, and, I was in the process of doing my dissertation, I was also really curious about that and how has porn changed. And just by the nature of, for purely pragmatic reasons, the filming process of pornography required that if you're going to make the investment, you had to make the investment big. You had to do full-length features. It wasn't just about kind of like turning on a cell phone and shooting a quick OnlyFans video.
Right.
So just by the ease of use, it's become a lot more easily produced and therefore, more available.
Insidious.
When VHS became kind of the preferred method of watching pornography in the 80s, it became then also very anonymous. If you think about it, before that, you either had to go to a store and buy some sort of print pornography, or you had to go to a movie theater, or if you really had a ton of money, you were able to kind of get the celluloids, but that required a great deal of means. Yeah. So, since the 80s, when it became very anonymous, we then didn't have to deal with the kind of perceived or real shame of how we were receiving and expressing our sexuality.
Right.
When we are not then facing the shame or the conversation or bringing it out into the open, that shame unfortunately becomes so much greater.
Right.
And when you marry out of control behavior with shame, you get addiction.
Right. Interesting too that tell me what you think of this statement. I think a lot of even just normal television today is almost kind of pornographic because I'm old enough to remember like, back in the day in the 70s or 80s watching a television show, maybe a woman and a man kissed or whatever. Now, like just regular primetime television, I'm like, dude, what the heck? This is, and I'm not listen, I DJ for a living. Like I'm no prude. I see a lot, but it just seems like quote unquote porn is so insidious and prolific into everything that even like a regular movie today, which would be like rated PG-13 or R, back in the 80s would be a rated X, I think. Like, I mean, yeah. So, I mean, do you see that too, like in society, that things have been kind of like pornized, so to speak?
It's funny that you mentioned that because something you said earlier made me think like there is so much more explicit imagery that it's constantly stoking the fire. I mean, even if you just open, if I open my For You page on Instagram, depending on what I have looked at, and mind you, I'm a sex therapist, so I'm coming across a lot of different spicy content. But if I just open my For You page, there is a good chance that I'm going to see somebody shaking their ass on my For You page. And I'm not actively looking for that.
Right.
But if you are even mildly going into that realm of explicit imagery, you are going to be inundated by it. So when you're thinking of the role of testosterone too, you mentioned earlier, the addiction isn't sequestered to just men, but it is largely a male problem. And when we think about the role of testosterone, I'm never going to say that testosterone makes men objectify women, but what it does is it amplifies everything. It amplifies any sort of drive, aggressive, sexual, or whatever. So if you're looking at a sexual drive that's then amplified by testosterone, you are looking at an entire segment of society that is going to potentially be drawn to progressively more explicit and illicit imagery. So there's just a very, very small leap from getting lost in the rabbit hole of explicit imagery on Instagram or, Twitter, which is a hotbed for pornography, to then saying, what, I just want to go straight to, Pornhub, I just heard was, kind of outlawed in I think Idaho. They banned access to, or maybe it was somewhere in the South actually. So, this is becoming a problem that is being addressed on some level, but I don't know if just the outright banning of it or restricting it is the answer, because as we know, human nature, when you ban something or you restrict it, it then becomes taboo. And anything stokes sexual fire, it's taboo.
Oh yeah. Well, interesting too, I think, and porn, you tell me what you think here, but look, I think there's a fine line too, because look, I can go to a museum and see Michelangelo sculptures. They're naked. Men and women are hugging and the breasts are out. I would make the argument Playboy, not pornography. It's just naked women. You could, I've taken art classes in college where women have gotten nude in front of me in the class and we paint, we'll watch them and we paint their body, paint on a canvas, their body. So, like that's the other thing, I guess, right? You'd have to kind of like define what is pornography, because like if you talk to my mother, anybody who even shows cleavage, she's an old Italian, whatever, oh my god, so it's like, I think that's the thing too. Like, is watching a man and woman make love on a television screen, is that a bad thing?
It's a very good question. I think depending on who you're asking, that, like you said, your mom would probably have a very different definition of what pornography is than I would. But I think it comes down to the mutual respect that is expressed in not only the act itself, like if there's degradation as opposed to mutual respect in the relationship, but I'm also a very big believer in the person that is behind the camera. Whether it's cinema or it is a pornographic video. There's a lot of female directors and ethical porn directors out there that are very caring and very considerate about how the actors are portrayed.
Right.
And it's a very different feel. It's still pornography, it's still kind of objectively about two women or two men, or man and a woman, or multiple people, engaging in the act of sex, which, I think objectively speaking is pornography. But it's also, that is going to determine the outcome of how someone perceives how those people should be treated, and probably interprets that in their everyday experience.
Right.
So whether or not, something that is a rated R movie could be considered pornography, I don't even know that we are ever going to be able to come up with a consensus of whether or not it is. But it really is, there was not to get too academic, but there was a Supreme Court decision that was handed down back in the 60s that really was about whether or not it was a movie was pornographic and should have been censored and not shown in the movie theaters. And the justice that handed down the ruling was like, I don't know what it is, but I know it when I see it.
Yeah. I've heard that line. Right.
So, that's kind of the best kind of.
Yeah. Well, I feel like pornography, or the misuse of porn, the addiction to porn, is kind of like alcohol. You could have a drink. A person could watch two consenting adults make love on film. Okay, that's a drink. But when you bastardize things and warp things and weaponize alcohol, or in this case, porn or gambling, whatever, now there's an issue. Now there's moral issues. There's a problem. I mean, does that sound maybe correct to you?
No, I think you're on the right track. And anytime you have kind of a narrowing definition of what's going to bring you pleasure, and a narrowing experience of whatever that thing is that you are going to experience, that you are going to kind of seek out, that's when it becomes problematic.
Right.
So if your only experience with sexuality, or your only experience with orgasm, can be achieved through utilizing porn, that's when we're looking at where it's going from, okay, a normalized use of it to a problematic use of it. Right. Just like alcohol or sugar, if the only way you can have fun is by drinking,
you got a problem.
We're looking at, is this problematic?
Yeah. And I think, I'm sure you've heard this a bazillion times, but porn also becomes a problem, I think, when young men start to see women as a number or commodity or not human. They're just this thing on the screen. And then you go down a slippery slope and you start to kind of lean towards, that's how they just are, these women. You don't even call them women anymore. I think that's another danger, when you start to see human beings as they're just commodity numbers. I think if a young man watching this is at that point, you need help. Like, it's not good.
Yeah.
These are, and I think that's what porn does more often than not, is makes men and women, particularly women, look like, quote unquote, the piece of meat. So my other question to you is, this is it's kind of a dumb question, but again, young men, kind of along this vein, what I was just talking about, do young women want to be treated like the way women are treated in porn? So if a young man is out there, and wants to meet somebody, I mean, do women want to be treated like a piece of meat? It's a dumb question, but I got to ask it, because there are men out there who think, that's what you do to women. Like, so do women want to be treated like the women in porn?
Well, I'm glad that you asked that question, because this is exactly what I studied for my dissertation. I asked essentially the same question, and I worked with college age women between 18 and 23. And I asked essentially that question, how do you perceive your male partner's use of porn as affecting how your sex life has turned out? Like, how does your own experience of porn affect how you view sex and how you view your body? And overwhelmingly, the answer was that their experience of their male partner's expectations was overwhelmingly affected by their pornography use. So they experienced more expectation that, that they were going to want choking, or that they were going to want anal, or that they were going to want to engage in some sort of BDSM practice.
Right.
And not every woman, I wouldn't even say a majority of the women, experienced a lack of interest in their consent. But what I took away from this was that most of the women that I studied were not comfortable coming out with their interests of what they wanted in the sexual realm, because they didn't want to make their partner feel bad, knowing that their partner's expectation was for rough sex or choking or BDSM or anal practices.
Right.
That to me said a lot, because it not only said that the men were influenced by porn, but it also said that the women were influenced by porn and what the expectation was for them going into their sexual experiences.
Well, and interesting you mentioned that, because I think, like a lot of things in society and life, and I think men think that that's what they should want too, because they see it in the porn. Oh, well, then I should probably want that, when a lot of men don't want that, but they're living this, this facade that will, quote unquote, the porn industry, society says I should be like this. And I think they come into it, and there's so much miscommunication. The girl thinks, or whoever the partner thinks, I'm not going to say anything because that's what they want. The guy really doesn't want that, but he's been programmed to think that. And so there's all this miscommunication. No one can be real. Everyone's got a facade up. And then the thing is, everyone gets hurt. And you can extrapolate that to almost anything in life. Like, oh, well, if I don't have the latest Mercedes, I'm a loser. If I don't have the latest shoes, I'm a loser. Like, everything is, these expectations, and porn is no different. It warps the reality, and people get hurt emotionally, etc., and destroys relationships. I mean, does that sound like I'm making sense?
Yeah, I think what you said earlier of losing a generation of men to this is more interestingly looked at as 70% of the students that I interviewed were exposed to porn without their consent. Right? They experienced it at a party, or it was literally, airdropped onto their phone, or they saw it by accident. So if we're looking at 70% of the at least my female population experienced pornography without their consent or unintentionally, then we're looking at this expectation that, oh, boys will be boys, they're going to look at porn. So we have to assume that at least a good chunk of the male population is being exposed to pornography unintentionally. And then you're looking at the intentional use. Right. So these boys, especially in states where there is not a comprehensive sex ed and there's not a comprehensive consent education, they're learning about sex through the use of porn, yes, which, because of its ubiquity, because of the anonymity, because of the availability, is, unfortunately, if we are not teaching our kids about sex, they are going to learn about it. And we have no control over how they're going to learn about it.
Yep.
So the reason that I did the work that I did was because I firmly believe that pornography literacy should be a part of comprehensive sex education. I'm not saying that we should be showing porn in schools, but we should be having these conversations that we're having right now about consent and what are the risks of watching too much pornography, and too much could be, very subjective, but what is too much, right? What is appropriate consent? What is appropriate communication? Right. What's the reality of, this is the kind of sex you're seeing on pornography, but this is not the kind of sex that is expected of a virile man, right?
Right.
It's not where you should be getting your masculinity from.
Right. Yeah. And unfortunately, our men and women get their sense of identity through a lot of erroneous places, not just porn, but again, pop culture and music and all stuff. And we're always misguided. And this is kind of what you're saying too, about family is important. Teachers are important. Our community is important. And this is just one spoke in the wheel of life and how to raise a child or better ourselves. So I want to say too, it's like, if people are addicted, young men and women are addicted to porn, not only does it warp your sense of what a relationship is, but you're watching porn, you could be going to the gym, or you could be connecting and making real friends, or you could be making more money, but you're stuck sitting watching porn and again, other things, but you're like, I think people think, well, come on, what's it going to do? It's going to make me more horny. No, it's going to make you less effective at your job. It's going to make you get into worse physical shape because you're not getting out, you're not moving, you're not doing something. Like, you could have a rich, fulfilling life, but you're stuck sitting. And this is talking about addiction now, not because you saw it once in your lifetime, but yeah, I think that's the other thing people don't kind of see. It's like, hey, look around, like you've been inside the house now for 12 hours between gambling and video gaming and porn. It's like it's a collateral damage, it's domino effect. So what could someone do if they think they have a porn addiction? What would you tell them to do?
Well, I think there's a lot of resources out there that people could probably look at, but I just want to caution your audience, if they're going to be like self-diagnosing, that it might be problematic to kind of just assume that there is that there is a problem, right? I think it's more about assessment of, like you were saying, what are the downstream effects of my pornography use? Like, maybe that's a good place to start. Yeah. Instead of kind of immediately going and saying, like, I have a porn addiction, because I think that can really be shame-inducing unnecessarily. That it's really about, what are the downstream effects of my porn use? Is it, at the basic level, interrupting my sleep? Right. Is it interrupting my capacity to get my job done? Is it interrupting my capacity to eat and drink water, right? Yeah, yeah. Like basic, bottom of Maslow's hierarchy needs. Right. And then, being able to kind of say, is this affecting my ability to connect with my partner? Or if you don't have a partner, is this preventing me from feeling safe and willing to kind of risk the vulnerability of going and having external relationships? So I think we have to kind of go up the ladder of, the basic needs that we have in our lives, and all the way up and including to, is this preventing me from really understanding how my body works without porn? Am I able to achieve orgasm without the use of pornography? Have I lost a sense of my internal sense of fantasy, and maybe even lost my ability to identify what kinds of touch feel good, because the only way I can get aroused is through the use of visual stimuli, right? If you stop using pornography, like cold turkey, say, and then you go and try to have sex with your partner, or even just try to masturbate without the use of visual stimuli, and you've forgotten how to become aroused through physical touch, even if that's not a problem right now because you don't, say, have a partner, think of how that's going to affect your ability to connect with another human being.
And you got to get ahead of it, right? And I would say you probably don't need to tell a therapist that you have a porn addiction. To your point, maybe you feel shame. Just go and say, listen, I'm struggling with addiction, period. I have addictive personality. You can mask it with that. And if they can't go to a physical, in-person therapist like yourself, I mean, I always talk about on my show, you can go to Talkspace or BetterHelp, and that's online FaceTime, anonymous therapy. It's great. I use it just for my daily stressors of life and my business, and you get yourself a therapist, and you just, that's how you would start. And it doesn't have to be a big thing like, oh my God, but just, I think I always say every single person on earth, if you have a brain, you need a therapist. Forget about porn. Just we all need therapy. We all need someone to talk to about anything, life stresses, family problems, whatever. And I get it. Not everybody has the money, but there's programs out there. There's things out there, and like you said, don't self-treat yourself. If you think you're going down that road, you got to talk to somebody, maybe somebody at your church or synagogue or mosque or somebody. And the first stride is the longest. And this is, like I said, an important problem that we're having in this country, because, again, it's affecting young men. It's affecting relationships. And it doesn't have to be this way. I think this is one thing to do, is to talk about this like you and I are on a public medium. And I mean, I thank you for coming on. Is there anything before we part ways that you would like to impart on us, Dr. Kate?
As a part B to that answer, I think the role of shame in any sort of addiction is kind of part and parcel of what exacerbates it, right? So if you are experiencing, to your point, of any sort of porn addiction, any sort of, just addiction to avoidance of emotion, even, right? Because we can become addicted to anything, because really it's about how our brains perceive safety. And if our definition of safety becomes more and more and more narrow, to the point where we're, cutting out huge chunks of our lives to stay in this kind of safe cocoon, we've become addicted to that sense of safety, which, is obliterating our ability to live a free, open life. So if you are willing to talk to anybody, BetterHelp, Talkspace, a friend, a pastor, a rabbi, or even if you have the means, a therapist, being able to kind of bring that shame and those worries into the light. Shame can't survive if it's brought into the light. And I think if that's the one thing that your audience takes away, it's that if you're talking about it, then it has less of an impact.
Yeah. And again, like I said earlier in the program, every single man on earth has seen porn at least once. So, I get it. There's a shame thing, but in a way, there shouldn't be a shame thing because all of us, yours truly, everyone has seen porn. Like, so it doesn't have to be this thing like I can never talk to anybody. No, talk to Steve. And people have shame for anything, right? Like even just, I'm stressed. I don't want to talk to somebody because I might look like I'm weak. Like, there's an old saying, humble yourself, you shall be exalted. Exalt yourself and you shall be humbled. Like, take that step. We're all human. We're all flawed. We're all weak. It's normal, but what's not normal is to sit there and just do nothing. That's not, we all deserve better than that. But Dr. Kate, thank you so much for being on Wellness Week. I got to have you back on again. Yeah. And again, where can they find you on Instagram and other social media?
So if you'd like to follow my Instagram, it's communicate, Cayte, and communicate.com is my website. I'm actually currently in the process of fluffing it up and zhuzhing it up a little bit. So hopefully you can kind of see the new and improved one. But I do a lot of relationship and practical sexual kind of, I'm your best friend that just happens to be a sex therapist. I try to be as relatable as possible and just give it to you straight. And if you have any questions, feel free to DM me and I'll do my best to answer.
Dr. Kate, thank you for coming on Wellness Week Live. And thanks everybody for watching. Don't forget, like, subscribe. We got a lot more great content coming up. And I'm going to sign us off in 5 seconds. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Kate. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.